Welcome, everyone. I'm Geraldine Weiser, Director of Business Development at Corporate College, and I really want to welcome all of you to today's session. As we wait for the presentation to start, I wanted to let you know that after today's session, a copy of the presentation will be emailed to you along with our survey, and we're really looking forward to gaining your feedback from today's session. Also, now would be a good time to do an audio check on your computer or device. Just check the audio settings and your volume control. Make sure that you can hear everything well, because we want you to have a great experience. Uh, However, today's session is muted, so everyone coming in is muted. So we really look forward to hearing from you, both messages, comments, questions, and everything through the chat box. And even though your chat messages will only be seen by you, you won't see other attendees' chat messages. Janine will be going through the chat messages and responding to as many of the comments and questions as possible, and we'll also help her as well uh, review those particular comments that come through and questions. So be ready to send in your comments as necessary. And with that, I'm very excited to go ahead and get started. And thank you for joining Corporate College's webinar series, Live with the Experts. We really look forward to bringing you really relevant information, tools, and topics to support you and set you up for success. We find really each day so many businesses are shifting to a new reality of remote working and learning. And here at Tri-C, we're committed to serving you in this rapid time of change by providing actionable resources, those things that are really going to help you and help your teams not only succeed, but thrive wherever your team is located, whether they're still at the work site or working remotely. Our webinar series is just one of the new things that Corporate Colleges has added to our resource tool belt. And we're prepared to help the workforce really overcome challenges and achieve both personal as well as business goals. We're doing that through our series of 4 themes of webinars, with today's session related to virtual leadership. The other sessions you'll see are focusing on working remotely, maybe navigating a transition, change, and also personal health and well-being. And as many of you know, Corporate College has a very distinguished and wonderful talent bench of facilitators and subject matter experts. Today, I am so pleased to introduce our presenter and facilitation specialist, Janine Sergey. In addition to her role here with Corporate College, Janine is a professor of strategy for Lake Forest Graduate School of Management and a senior course leader on strategy, leadership, and thinking skills with the American Management Association. Janine is a successful global strategy leadership expert, organizational development expert, and one who's helped thousands of individuals, teams, and organizations across a wide range of industries for more than the past 30 years. She has hands-on experience at every managerial level and is a dynamic catalyst for change with her real-world perspective, enabling countless individuals and teams to face their challenges as they move forward in the future. And we couldn't be more thrilled here at Corporate College to have Janine as a part of our team. So with that, I'm very pleased to present to you Janine Sergey. Welcome, Janine. Good morning. How you doing?
Hi, Geraldine. Good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for giving up this hour. And I really hope you're going to find it so useful as you walk away with some tips and tools to practically use back with your own teams. You know, we're sitting in unprecedented times. And so that means some of you may have been managing remote teams for quite some time now. I know I've been somewhat of a remote team manager all the way back when many decades. I was the first remote worker in the largest utility in the world. And from there, when I opened up my own company, I had branches, 3 branches around the country, and we worked across Africa and Europe, and again, working with remote teams. And then transitioning here to the States, my remote team management has evolved when I'm an interim CEO, managing both co-locating and remote teams, as well as with my own team with rollouts of leadership development programs. So everything I'm sharing with you today is really from the trenches of how I learned how to make life much easier for myself. Now, there may be a whole lot more of you who've been thrown into the deep end with working and managing teams remotely. And it's somewhat if we can think of better times pre COVID, post COVID, when we can be out on the water on the sailboat, and there we are enjoying the sunshine, only for the wind to change direction. And the pessimist amongst us goes, "Oh no, the wind has changed direction. We're never going to get to where we want to go to." And the optimist amongst us says, "Don't worry, if we sit here long enough, we'll get to where we want to go to when the wind changes direction." But folks, it's the realist who reads the winds, understands the environment, also looks to the capabilities and capacity of the boat and adjusts the sails in just the right way to catch the winds so as to get us to where we need to go to. And hopefully you're able to do that through some of the tools and techniques we'll talk about today. So our journey is basically around remote team setup. And I'm very aware that some of you have set up your teams already 5, 6 weeks ago. But the key thing is, I want you to do a quick check and say, hey, have I done everything I needed to do? And are there any gaps I need to go back and fill? And coupled with that, we're going to look at both your teams, your targets and your tracking, and your technology, so you can walk away with some commitments of actions you want to take. Now, there was a longitudinal study done by Nicholas Boom down at Stanford. He's an economist there, and he did it for C-Trip. It was a study over 9 months, and they offered 1,000 workers the opportunity to work remotely, half of whom elected to go remote. Now, with working remotely over those 9 months, so that's 500 people working remotely, what did they find? Well, they actually found there was a 13% increase in performance from the remote team members. That's almost an extra day of output per week. So they estimated a savings of $2,000 per employee. The other piece that was really interesting that they found from the results is there was a 50% drop in attrition rates, which is phenomenal. Now, during COVID-19, what we know in the US, homebound employees are logging 3 hours more per day on the job before than they were with city and statewide lockdowns. And that's according to data from NordVPN. And that's in fact more than any other country. So I know one of the fears and concerns of leadership is out of sight, out of mind. People are not working. In fact, the opposite is true. Now, one of the key things we need to realize with this research, though, is that during this research, people had a choice. And that's different from what we're experiencing now. Here we have the children around, the space issues, privacy issues are also very different under these circumstances, and we need to take that into consideration. And what's also interesting, if we look back at that research, one of the key problems that the remote team workers found, in fact, the key problem, was the sense of isolation. So they instituted 1 day back in the office per week because of that. And of course, that's not possible now. And we need to keep that in mind as well. So it sounds like everything's so hunky dory. Here's another little piece, though, from the research. At the end of the study, the company gave the workers a choice of whether they wanted to remain remote or come back into the office. And up to half of them actually elected to come back into the office, with the primary reason being to get away from that sense of isolation. And so if you're going to work remotely post COVID-19, choice plays a huge role in it. And obviously the setup of a space that's conducive to working remotely would also be essential, and that sense of connectedness that you could have with your team members is going to be crucial, and we'll speak to that as well as we move through everything that we're doing. Now, as of 2017, only 3% of full time workers in the US said they primarily worked out of their homes. And that's according to the Census Bureau's survey. Now, in 2019, what's really interesting at the Global Leadership Summit, they predicted that more than half of all employees will work remotely by the end of 2020. And guess what? That was pre COVID-19. And of course, this has been accelerated. Now, some companies you'll look at your strategies and see, do you have to bring your workers back? And sometimes you're going to look at your efficiencies, your cost ratios, and you may decide to have some remaining remote. And so it's going to be a whole new work reality and how you're going to have to manage. So let's go to that remote team setup, folks. With moving to a remote team setup, have you considered how you, your manager, is going to connect with your team? And not only that, how are your team members going to actually connect with each other? And how will your team connect with the organization and the other teams in the organization as a whole? And then how is your team going to connect with those folk out in the environment, your customers, your vendors? You actually need to consider that specifically from a remote team setup. So there's some key things we need to consider at setup, not least of which is communicating. And in order to communicate, you need to create a communication campaign strategy while being remote. And that's another thing. Have you created a strategy when you go back to co-locating? All right, because all those transition points need a campaign strategy. But you also need to execute a communication strategy and then hold frequent one on one conversations with feedback with each one of your team members. I cannot stress it enough. Last weekend, I actually had lunch outside with social distancing with the CEO who was moving to a new organization. Do you know that before he's even joined, he's held a virtual meeting with every single employee? He has committed and already had one on ones with every one of his direct reports, a one on one with everyone who reports to his direct reports, and he is hoping, not hoping, he will be, he says, meeting with every single employee as far as he can go, even before his start date. That's how important one on ones are. Now, the next piece, of course, is to clarify. You need to establish specific clarification norms within your own team, all right, for collaboration. Now, why would you ever not want to know what is expected of you? So, why would you do that to your own people? You need to clarify. And don't assume people will know how to collaborate. You need to be specific with those collaboration norms. You also need to establish new appropriate virtual team meeting norms. What happens in that virtual meeting? And create a virtual team working agreement. And we're going to look at that in a lot more detail because it is so essential. And the final piece, folks, is to care. Have you set up a guide of how to set up a remote workspace to team members so that they don't have to go searching of how to optimize their workspace? Just providing tips and tricks to stay focused as a remote worker, helped with ideas of how to even enjoy working remotely, especially given the privacy space, children, and all the demands on them, how to organize and de-stress in that kind of environment. Just ways to deal with the isolation. Absolutely key. So I wanted to show you how simple this could be. This is an example of a communication you could send out, something that I put together that you could use. Just quick and easy, very direct, not a lot of text, with some tips for your team members. In fact, I love sending out infographics because that's a one-page visual that shows key points in a graphic pictorial way with only some key text on, but gets the message across. Because you mustn't assume that everyone consumes information the same way. I have to giggle. I mean, this is how bad I am. The last time I was interim CEO, one of the key things is the CEO prior to me had managed from his corner office behind huge screens. And one of the complaints was that there was this huge lack of communication. I was going to insistent this would not happen. Did strategy sessions, broke it down, team meetings, the whole suit. But one of the key things that I also did was I sent out a weekly email from the CEO with a our logo made fun in the subject line with jumpstart action, so they knew it was a message from the CEO, so of course they'd read it. And hey, I write well. It was short, it was pithy, it was humorous, it was related to the strategy and the focus I wanted people to have for that particular week. And I went, wow, I'm communicating, only to find that people weren't reading it. Oh, shocker. I wish I could tell you I found the solution straight away. I didn't. It was a few weeks later. I noticed quite a few of our clinicians were looking at their smartphones, and that's where they were taking notes. And that's where it dawned on me. So I took that same email that I sent out every week, and in addition, I created 140 character tweets that I sent out with the same messaging. And lo and behold, I reached more people. Do you know what? Still not everyone. And it was only in the workforce. They mentioned that YouTube was the second most searched engine online, and I went, oops, eureka. 1 minute 47 seconds maximum with animated graphics to make it fuck up the message. And that way I was able to actually make sure I communicated where it was heard by everyone. All right, so let's get then straight into the team. And what we want to make sure of is which FUD do your remote teams want? Do they want fear, uncertainty, and doubt? Or are they looking for the feedback, the understanding, and the development folks? And that's a no brainer, I know. So we have to start looking at remote team members' needs. And so we know from research that these are key needs. Take a moment and I want you to identify for yourself what are your three top needs at the moment as you sit being a remote team member. Just make a note for yourself. All right, I'm betting if we had to ask everyone to notate what they were, they'd be a little bit across the board, even though you may have some mention, congregating on a few more than others. And it's okay that it's across the board. Now, what's important is for you not to transfer your own needs onto your team members' needs, because each of your team members may have different needs. And it's up to you to help your team to identify what their needs are, and then for you to decide in conjunction with them how you can help and support to meet their needs and satisfy them. Now, this was a LinkedIn advisor survey that was conducted in April of this year, 2020. And one of the key things that people were having was a better plan for instituting the social distancing to keep myself and others safe when we go back to work, if you're going to co-locate. So that's another key piece. The other element that they wanted was more frequent and consistent messaging about leadership's thoughts and plans. And even if you don't know specifically how to address issues in this crazy, uncertain, ambiguous, complex time, just the fact that you've recognized that they're issues and that you're working on it also needs to be communicated. Now, I know most of you may be aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And having said that, here they are. And I had to giggle when I thought about it, and I went, yeah, but in today's age, guess what? I think we're all saying, please give me reliable internet. We need it as a remote team member. All right, so meeting needs are one thing. Now we have to look at the rules of engagement. And folks, creating our normal codes of conduct, value statements with the behaviors are all well and good and necessary, but certainly not sufficient in a remote team setting. Instead, I highly recommend that you develop a team working agreement. And what this does, it provides consistency and structure. It's well documented in terms of procedure and expectations. And also, what it does, it fosters equity and transparency. Now, what I want you to do is take a moment and see which of these have you done. And no sacred or holy cows. Just honestly say, which have I done? All right. And now that you've had a moment to look at it, it will certainly start giving you a clue of what you may still need to do. Right. My recommendation, do more to start, folks. You can always check in with your team and pare it back if needed, but I would over communicate, over clarify to begin with, and do it with your team so that they don't feel like it's micromanaging, but more a matter of us working out what will work for us as a team in how we work together and what the expectations are. Um, I was rather distressed by an email that was done internally in a company, and when I saw that kind of a communication go out, I went, oh boy, they have not worked out a team working agreement for sure. It's something said something like, don't get distracted because you're on your own. It's easy to get into bad habits. There's the lure of the internet. But just think, what would I do if I was in the office? I mean, I can, even the way I'm saying it, I can hear it's just giving me the heebie jeebies. All right. That's not the type of tone you want to have. Um, this was an email reviewed in Bloomberg where, oh, here was one. We'll be watching closely. Are you kidding me? That feels like Big Brother bad. You want to be careful with that as well. So your tone, your style that you use is crucial. There's something that I say constantly. We shape company culture by how we show up on a daily basis and how we interact with each other and our external stakeholders. You know why? Because our behaviors matter, folks. The actions we take matter, and the environment we create around us matters. So please watch, as a manager, how are you showing up? Now, the basis of everything is to build a trust culture. And I know most of you know that. The key thing here is, if we want to perform as a team successfully, we need to have first created an environment that sets us up to interact well. And of course, trust then is at the foundation. So I wanted to share with you something that is so simple in conceptualization, and in that way will help direct you with some of the actions you may need to be taking. So this is from a Dr. Theodore, who found that there are three crucial elements to trust. The first one being credibility. And this is where, in chat, please feel free to add any additional behaviors you can come up with over and above those that I'm showing on the screen now. Because you need to think, all right, that credibility needs to be high on both sides. I mean, if you didn't think your manager was credible, right, would you trust him and her? No, exactly. So, what else would you need to do? Let's share that for everyone to see. And caring, all right, that needs to be high too. If others don't feel that you care, are they likely to trust you? I know I wouldn't. So, from a survey that was run in April of 2020, you know what came out as really high? The need for compassion. Isn't that a shocker, right? And so here's some behaviors, again, that you could think about in terms of doing. And of course, there are so many more. And then, folks, don't forget to lower the risk for people, because it's not enough that both credibility and caring is high. We need to lower that risk, because If we haven't, how much harder it's going to be for someone to trust you. It would be something as simple, yes, what I'm seeing in chat. Don't, if someone tells you something in confidence, don't go and tell everyone else out about it. Don't put someone on a project without the necessary clarification or the right resources. If you haven't helped someone set up their home office space to function efficiently and effectively, you're in all intents and purposes increasing their risk. If you don't make contact with your people, you are increasing their risk. If you don't give them feedback, not only does that go with credibility, but it also goes with risk if they have to try and figure out your agendas. All right. So when we look at it, it's all about think relationships, not transactions, folk. Think collaboration, not competition. Right? So much about relationships is interlinked because relationships enable results, and in turn your results build relationships. It's a very symbiotic relationship, and at the basis of it all is trust. Okay, and you have to be able to trust your teammates, even more so in a virtual setting. So what we need to do is we need to be able to build our social capital. It's somewhat like making deposits into a bank account, as Stephen Covey says. And the more that we make the deposits, even those small deposits, the stronger that account looks. All right. So this is all great when everything's going well, but we're human after all. And guess what? There is likely to be conflict. Now, when the pressure cooker looks like it's about to blow, it doesn't feel so comfortable. But conflict in and of itself is not bad, so long as you have an eye on the gauge, folks, and you proactively realize it's that the conflict's on the horizon, you have a plan of how to deal with it, all right, and that the conflict is about issues and ideas and it's not personal. All right. It's similar how I asked my kids to go to marital counseling before two of them got married. And my in law kids looked at me and my kids said, get used to her. Now, why? It's because when times are good, that's when you want to plan for when things are not so good. It's what I do with everyone when I speak to strategy in organizations and we planning. All right, because every journey is going to hit some bumpy spots along the way, and you need to work out the rules of the game. So let's learn from each other. What parameters for handling conflict would you set with your team in terms of how you're going to handle conflict in the virtual environment? All right, let's see what's coming up here. Oh, Bradley. And oh, I see there, Rafaela. Yes, take a breath. My grandma used to say that count to 10, or if we do it from a more psychological perspective, work up your ladder of inference so you can find alternatives. That's your breathing space and be present. Oh, yes, Karen. Oh, and there I'm seeing Natalie and Liz. Yes, you all speak to listen. Don't react immediately. And Sandra, don't preach. So, Liz, that listening process that you speak to is letting people vent so they can diffuse. Yep. And most definitely, Natalie, as you've pointed out, so that you're allowing issues to be brought out into the open. And yeah, Andrea, as you mentioning, you need to give time to be able to review it, even you as a manager. And yes, Sandra, you need to be able to define the issue or the problem. All right. And not to talk around it, but handle it as you've mentioned there, Tammy, directly and in a timely way. Now, Diamond, you speak about confronting it. And if I'm understanding correctly, that would be, as Trevor's mentioned, that it's issue based, of course, and not the person. Loretta, obviously, keeping that open communication. And yes, Erica, with everyone involved. But if it's only with one person, then Melody, you've got it spot on, where take the topic offline if it occurs in public, um, and then speak only with them. Um, Andrea, as you've mentioned, and it's all around that timeliness as well. All right. Um, and here's the thing, I think, Trisha, you also mentioned do it in person, not in email, which means in this kind of environment remotely, get on video. I use video all the time with my remote team members. If you think about isolation, not wanting compassion, being empathetic, and you're only going to use your voice. And we know, if any of you remember your sound waves, from physics back at school, the tops and the bottoms of our sound waves are actually cut off in our telecommunications. And so the nuances of our voice actually dissipates, and we're only going to rely on words. And if we think back to Dr. Morabian in terms of the impact of words, voice, and behavior and communication, we need the video. So you absolutely spot on with that. Um, And yes, I see one of you here mention, please get people not to respond to emails with anger. Stephen, I always say have the to and removed. I copy, remove, I write a response. It's very cathartic. And if I am going to then respond, I go back, take away all the emotions. So emails are only neutral or positive before sending. And then, of course, I think let's close this with the ideas of Diamond, you saying collaborate absolutely in conflict situations. Turn it into a problem solving session for sure. And Bradley, let's close with yours, which is just lead by example. People will see how you handle conflict, and in turn, they'll take that as a norm as well. But specify some of these things, folk. All right. So let's get into targets and tracking here. All right. Culture is really about how you work, how we talk to our customers. Is speed more important than quality? How we communicate with each other? Is it going to be phone call or email? How much work should we do even? Should we work 40 hours, 80 hours? Like I said, work that out in your working team agreement. Now, what you don't want is to have any of your team members looking like this. We need to clarify expectations in both directions straight away, folks. And a matrix I love to use is this one. It's so simple, but it's putting each one of the team members in as well as you as a team lead. And we demarcate the roles, responsibilities, and you can get those from your KPIs, your key performance indicators, your key focus areas, your priorities. Um, You'll pick out those responsibilities, also to specify the deliverables from each person, what they have to produce, and what the decision making authority is, especially in a remote team setting, and to make sure that there are no roadblocks, or you, the manager, being the roadblock around the decisions. Now, just to be able to help, what does each of those mean? Say, for example, one of the roles is the finance role, right, in the team. And the responsibilities are budget sign off, fiduciary controls, balanced budget. Then the deliverables may look like budget, sign off, online entry system, say. And you can see then how important the decision making would be to differentiate what's the decision making at this level, what's this person's manager's decision making authority, the manager above that's authority as well. All right. So, what do you, oh, and then the final piece, which I don't want to forget, all right, is also demarcating what each team member, who they are the go to person for in the team. Right? So everyone knows when and why they would go to them. And I would make this not only visible to your own team, but to all your team members. All right. So, what's the value, perhaps, in doing such a matrix? Any thoughts in chat? Oh, yes, Loretta, Rafaela, the clarity of roles, absolutely, and the expectations I've got here in chat. Um, so, you've got then the acknowledgement of responsibilities and who's accountable for what, Erica. And Diamond, I see it's about weeding out the duplication. Oh, you are so not kidding. Or seeing if there are any gaps, of course. And what else would, I'm just looking what else you've got here. Um, There'll be less conflict and confusion. Absolutely, Rafaela and Loretta, with no guessing happening. Claire, so everyone knows what everyone is doing. Yes. And Diamond, just so that it moves it into making it very, very concrete. That's for sure. And Melody, again, making it visible, which then affirms people. And Liz, as you've indicated, so many of us are visual learners. In fact, over 70% of us are visual learners. So the more we can make things visual, the better. And Erica, yes, so everyone knows who to go to for what. Now, I was asked the other day by an executive, all right, surely we shouldn't be expecting our people to be doing performance management at a time like this. And my reply is, if not now, then when? Because if you think performance management is a system or documentation, then I can see how you would ask a question like this. But that's not what performance management is, folk. Performance management involves communicating with your team to set performance expectations and ensure expectations are achieved. So now is the time to do it. You can't manage without managing performance. So what does it involve? Well, you better do some objective setting conversations, setting clear, smart objectives that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timeline. All right. And you need to do development planning conversations. Don't forget development now. A recent survey found that 69% of the workers who responded were planning to undertake some form of development over this time of COVID-19. So let the purposefulness um, and make it more focused in terms of benefiting both them as a team member and the organization and your team as well. And it's also another opportunity for engagement, a touch point with your people, and to show that you care if you're doing development with them. And don't forget, managers, your role is not judge and jury anymore, but more that of a coach. All right. And then again, the review conversations, if you're doing those one-on-one conversations and you are doing it throughout the year so that the final evaluation is not a surprise, that's what you want to have happen. In fact, if you use rating, I set the ratings at the beginning of the year with my team members so they know exactly what they're going to get. And if they fall below it in our one-on-ones, I can say, whoa, not hitting it. How can I help you get back to where you want to be? All right, so we're catching it timely and we ensuring that there is success. It makes you, the manager, a steward, a coach. How much better? Now, what you want to do, of course, is trust each other. But performance managing does not mean you don't trust your people. It's called trust, but verify. All right, you want to engage your team members. So ask yourself, have you, in the last 7 days, in the last 2 weeks, in the last 3 weeks, in the last month as well, and in the last quarter. Now, when working remotely, have you consistently allowed your direct reports' opinions to count? You know, I'm not putting this up just by accident. I want you to take note and say, what should I be doing? What have I missed out on with my team? Now, I'm a firm believer in applying project management tools and principles to how you manage performance because it's so much easier for everyone to see what's being done by whom, the tracking of it all. I love my Gantt charts, which is that visual view of where it starts and where it ends. And I color code green if it's on track, orange if it's hitting problems in the environment, but we're working on it, red if you didn't deliver. And we want to make sure that we're keeping performance status front and center. People love to know what they're chasing, what the purpose is, and if they can see how well they're doing against that. All right, so think of ways of visually, excitingly making it front and present with your people. Pie charts, Gantt charts, beaker filling up. Whoopsie. Now, when we look at performance issues in a remote team, one of the key things, remote wise as opposed to co-locating, you need to look out for possible signs that there is a performance issue. And folks, it is much harder to do because it's not quickly observable as it might be when you're co-locating. So remember that you want to be able to look at things like, yes, I'm seeing in the chat, you're picking up some of the stuff, the mixed work deadlines, feedback from others, goals not being met. There's so many ways you can do it. The key here, even if you have a hint, a feeling, something's not quite right, get on that one-on-one and address it. Bring it up. Say, I'm not sure if I'm reading this right. Help me understand, but get to it fast. Do not let it linger on forever because that will get you into a black hole fast, folks. And conversely, how do you reward and recognize others at a distance? All right, you've got to figure out ways that would make sense. I loved one of the CEOs who I coach sent me a snapshot where he sent pizzas to some of the workers who had been putting in unbelievable effort with unbelievable results, and he had them delivered. And it took a lot of effort to have it delivered all at the same time at different locations at everyone's houses to say thanks. That's award and recognition, and you should have seen their faces. That picture painted 1,000 words. All right. Think outside the box for some of those ideas. Now, again, going back to our working team agreement, your availability for communication and for collaboration needs to be worked out. And there's no one right way, folks. On the screen, you'll see examples from some companies that I've picked out on what they've made those hours or those response times that are non-negotiable for every single team member. You have to do what's right for your organization, for your team. So the thing you have to consider is what criteria should your decisions be based on? And it would be the nature of the work. Maybe your company system constraints, your customer interface needs will definitely impact it. Projects that the individuals are involved in, the interdependency of the work. Whether the surf is up or not, shouldn't be a consideration. All right. Just established priorities will influence it as well. Here's the thing. Given COVID-19 now, where, remember what I mentioned earlier, privacy, children need to be on computers and there may not be a whole slew of computers in the household for them to do their schooling and things. You do need to take into account during this context familial constraints. Given the COVID-19 circumstances, folks, don't forget that. All right, so think about when, how often, response times, and that's got to be sacrosanct when everyone has to be contactable, available, how quickly you're expecting responses during that time. But it's not okay to expect people to respond to emails at 11 p.m. at night, 3 a.m. in the morning. And I've been seeing reports of that, and that's not okay. So it comes down to how to deal with your people. Remember, in terms of providing information, each one of us have different motivators, which means we have different needs, which means we may want different information. And as I mentioned before, in a different format. Now, we also have to consider the self-fulfilling prophecy. Remember, what we expect is what we get. So if you expect your workers are not going to be lazy while they're being remote, Your attitude, what you send out, will probably put them there. All right. Rather do as von Goethe says, treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them to become what they are capable of being. And then we need to positively reframe because we know nothing is either good nor bad, but as Shakespeare has Hamlet say, but thinking makes it so. So reality is not what we discover, but what we create. When someone is being a naysayer and obstructing, you can say, wow, they're helping us to think critically about the risks involved in what we're doing. That immediately makes you think differently about the individual. And then we also need to consider how people are handling change. And what we do know is that people have different stress levels of the ability to handle change. But there are three key components I have found consistently over time. People need to understand the context, folks. All right. And if people understand the purpose and the why, it really helps bed down their stress feelings and makes them want to handle the change so much better. And control is key because we know from stress research, when you can identify what you can influence and you can take back some measure of control in your own workspace, you handle things so much better. So in this transition, have you helped your team members take back control for their work? And then comfort zone, we all creatures of habit. Have you helped them go into habits that, of course, are efficient, effective, seamless? All right. We need to get people back into their comfort zone. And finally, I wanted to share with you this was research done by Cabasa in terms of being hardy. And she found personalities who felt committed to what they're doing, in control of what they're doing, and challenged by what they're doing can actually deal with higher stress levels far better, having their effects of stress from a physiological, emotional, mental perspective, behavioral perspective, not being impacted adversely. And guess what? You know what they also discovered through the research? Is that these can be taught and can be structured into the way in which you manage your team. So you can see where I'm coming from here, folks. All right, so it is all about collaboration. It's about finding those common grounds and really expanding on it. So, key to all of this, of course, um, in that common ground, there's actually something Cantor, Mary Beth Moss Cantor, actually had an article in the Harvard Business Review, leading your team past the peak of a crisis, kind of as we are in now. And she spoke about that it starts with accountability, which of course we've already addressed in the target space. And it's also about tracking, which again, in that accountability we did earlier. And it's also about collaboration. And the other piece, delegation. So it goes back to the communication. Communicate, communicate, communicate. So, with those communications and the collaboration, when should you be using synchronous collaboration and when should you be using asynchronous collaboration? Now, when you're co-locating, you usually have team meetings. The employee stops by the manager's desk, the manager stops by the employee's desk, informal peer meetings, informal hallway meetings. Here's the thing, in remote teams, we don't have that. So that form of informal connecting should not be an afterthought. We need to think meaningfully about it. And we could do that in terms of IAM discussions as well, of course, and things. But now, if we look at synchronous collaboration, that's having to, when we have to do work together and we need to do it in real time. Now, some of you may have a mix of co-locating and remote team members, ask yourself, am I marginalizing the virtual team members with synchronous communications and they not there in the real time? right? With all those informal around the water cooler discussions. Again, you have to be more deliberate. So, some things to think about in synchronous collaboration. When it's urgent, if you want things to be brainstormed, if you need a FaceTime, do synchronous collaboration. The asynchronous collaboration, that's when work can be done independently and you need information to cross interfaces. And that's when it's not time sensitive. So it could be documents or ideas and status updates, questions about ongoing projects could actually be done asynchronously. And you do not have to hold meeting after meeting after meeting. So, as much as I'm saying, connect with your remote team members, please make it meaningful. Don't hold meetings just for the sake of holding meetings. All right. Now, because you've got remote team members, it is much harder to pick up all the variables at play and for all parties to be very aware and understanding of the context. All right. So we know context is necessary to understand normal circumstances in order to apply your critical thinking, right? And analyzing things and strategically thinking about things. Now, add in the mix of the virtual environment, so much harder to get those different perspectives. So, ask things like, what are you dealing with? What assumptions are being made, folks, instead of data? All right. How urgent is the situation? How much time do you have to come up with a solution? What is affected by the situation? Who's affected by the situation? Oh, what agendas or worldviews may they have, those people who are affected? What resources do you have to deal with or address the situation? And oh, yeah, here would be another question I think I'd ask. What are the possible consequences of not making a decision? All right. I think given our COVID-19 time, now's the time to learn the truth of Cantor's law, that everything can look like a failure in the middle. Unexpected obstacles, difficult predicaments just can arise in the middle of any organizational or human endeavor. Never mind just in the pandemic we've got now. But if you give up, then by definition, it's a failure. But if you are persistent, you pivot, and you persevere, there's hope for finding another successful path, and you need to do that with your team. Now, I understand all of you are going to have an organizational culture at play, and that will affect what happens to the culture of your own team. But you, as a manager of remote team or remote teams, need to be deliberate in building your culture. Right? You need to build trust, you need to build openness, you need to build transparency. By early April 2020, about 45% of workers said they were burnt out. And that was according to a survey of over 1,000 US employees done by Eagle Hill. All right. And almost half attributed the mental toll to an increased workload. And the juggling of the personal life and the professional life and the lack of communication from their managers and the lack of support from their managers. So you have to consider keeping morale up. And so, what communication plans are you sure to include now? So, I want us to also consider cadence, folk. Now, if you think about it, in a physical work world, an informal cadence seems to form. What happens? Just kind of close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself coming into the work environment on a typical day, pre being a remote worker. How did you enter? How do you walk? Who do you walk past? Who did you say hi to? Did you pick up a cup of coffee? Did you perch on someone's desk? Just go through a normal day's cycle at work in your mind. Now, guess what? That cadence is not present in the virtual environment as a remote worker. You need to be deliberate about creating a virtual remote team working environment, Cadence, and it needs to be team based. So think about how you can start setting that up so that it works for everyone. Now, if we look at technology, remember it's an enabler, folks. And you can't ask your team members to take action without the necessary resources. So, you may need technology for a whole lot of these reasons. All right. And you've got things like Zoom or WebEx or Google Hangouts or Blue Jeans or Join Me or Skype or GoToMeeting or Adobe, for your larger meetings. If you want quick ad hoc meetings, a few of those would work as well as Squiggle and Campfire. And again, these are just some of the technologies I can mention now, and there are going to be so many more moving into the future. So keep your eye out for what's going to work best for you. So Coco is nice for office presence of knowing who's available. You can also see that in Microsoft 365 or Google Drive. Um, if you need quick updates without a lot of integration, then P2 or I done this could work. But for project management, you may want to think more around things, systems like Trello or Basecamp or Planner Tool in 365. Kanban boards could work as well, of course. And then you can have the more sophisticated software. Of course, you could also use MS Project, or for more sophisticated project management for software design, and that you'll have your MS Project, your Asana, or your Pivotal Tracker, you know, as well. Sure, cloud storage, you've got your Dropbox, you've got Box, you've got Microsoft 365, you've got Google Drive, sure, instant message and chat, you've got slack.com, you've got IM, your informal connecting. If you want an in-company type Facebook, you've got Yammer, there's Uncover, you could use GIFs and memes, just for fun and morale as well. And when people can go out again, that isolation, some folk may want to look for co-working spaces. So they don't come necessarily into the office, but they've got somewhere to go. And of course, you've always got your corner Starbucks to go to or your corner coffee shop, but there's WeWork.com or ImpactHub.net or workfrom.com or regis.com are all options for those co-working spaces. Now, decisions of which tool to use obviously would be based on these factors as well. So don't forget those either. So folks, now it's up to you. What are the plans you can put into play of the actions you're going to take now? So that when you go out sailing, it is smooth sailing. You have to take ownership for the success of your team, folk. Communicate, clarify, care, coach as well. Make sure you focus on your culture. Create the cadence deliberately and bring in collaboration tools and make sure you follow through connecting with your team. All right. And with that in mind, good luck. Stay safe, stay well, but stay connected. Thanks for joining us today, folks.
Oh, thank you, Janine. That was amazing. And I don't think I could write fast enough. I'm sure a lot of people felt the same way. Uh, on behalf of Corporate College 2, we really want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please don't forget Janine's essential information, especially working with remote teams, set up the teams, focusing on the targets and tracking, and focusing on the technology. Just fabulous, Janine. Thank you. And remember, corporate college is here to serve you with essential learning to overcome the challenges you may be facing right now. We offer virtual classroom training and self paced online programs because, like Janine, we work together with our subject matter experts to provide organizational consultation services, training, and coaching. And when you visit the Corporate College website, you're going to find our learnings are available in a virtual classroom format ranging from everything such as frontline leadership certificate program, other programs very similar to what Janine has talked about today, to our technical, like Lean Six Sigma, and even our healthcare programs, such as the Patient Access Specialist program. And if you have groups, please feel free to give me a call to arrange a tailored session for your team. Also, we want you to be able to enjoy this presentation again, so feel free to rewatch it, share it by visiting our Corporate College free webinar series page in the next few days and by clicking on the free webinar series link. You can always also stay up to date by following us on social media. Thank you again for joining us today. Please stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you again, Janine.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.